The morning after my wife's funeral, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I never drank and a folder I never showed anyone. 41 years. That's how long Catherine and I had that kitchen table. We bought it second-hand from a couple in Barrie who were moving west. It had a scratch on one corner from when my son was 11 and thought it would be fun to drag his hockey bag across it. Catherine never let me sand it down. She said it was part of the story. I used to roll my eyes at that. That morning, sitting alone, I understood exactly what she meant. The folder was in the top drawer of her desk. She had told me about it 6 months before she passed, when the diagnosis shifted from manageable to we should have a conversation. She was very calm about it, the way she was calm about everything that mattered. She poured us both tea, sat down across from me, and said, "There's a folder in my desk, second drawer, beneath the old tax returns. When the time comes, read it before you tell the children anything." I didn't ask questions. After 41 years, I knew when Catherine had thought something through. She passed on a Tuesday in March, pancreatic cancer, the kind that doesn't give you much warning even when it does. The hospice's nurses were kind. My daughter flew in from Calgary the evening before, and my son drove up from Hamilton with his wife. We were all there. Whatever else happened after, and quite a lot happened after, I want to say that part was as good as it could have been. We held her hands. The funeral was on the Friday, St. Andrew's Presbyterian, the same church where we were married. My wife had arranged most of it herself, which was so thoroughly Catherine that even the minister smiled when he mentioned it. She had chosen the hymns, selected the readings, left a note about the flowers. She wanted yellow tulips, not lilies, because she always found Liz a little morbid for the occasion of celebrating a life. There were yellow tulips everywhere. The whole church smelled like spring. My son gave the eulogy. He did well. I was proud of him. That Saturday morning, the day after the funeral, my daughter and my son and his wife were all still at the house. My daughter had made herself very much at home in the guest room, and my son and his wife were in the basement suite. I was still sleeping, or not sleeping really, more lying in bed with the ceiling. In the bedroom Catherine and I had shared since 1987. I came downstairs around 7. My daughter was already at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a legal pad beside her. My son's wife was making eggs. My son was on his phone near the window. "Dad," my daughter said, looking up from her screen, "we were thinking, since we're all here, it might be a good time to sit down and talk practically. About the house, about everything." I looked at her legal pad. She had already written things on it. Columns. "Good morning," I said, and went to make coffee. She wasn't wrong that it needed to be discussed. The house, our house in Collingwood, was not a small matter. Catherine and I had bought it in 1994 when property in Grey County was still something 2 teachers could afford. It was nothing remarkable from the outside. 3 bedrooms, a good lot, a back deck that faced the escarpment, but 30 years of weekends and summers had done something to it. The market had done something to it too. A realtor had sent an unsolicited letter the previous fall, suggesting the property was worth somewhere in the range of $800,000. I had put the letter in recycling without showing Catherine. She would have found the number offensive, not because it was unwelcome, but because she disliked thinking of the house in those terms. "We just want to make sure you're taken care of, Dad," my son said, coming to sit down. His wife put a plate of eggs on the table and sat beside him. "There's no rush, obviously. But there's a lot to sort through." "There is," I agreed. My daughter turned her legal pad toward me. She had written 2 columns, keep and liquidate. Under liquidate, she had already written Collingwood property. I looked at the pad. I looked at my daughter. She was 43 years old, a project manager for a software company in Calgary. Very organized, very capable. I had always admired those qualities in her. I was looking at them differently that morning. "You've been busy," I said. "I just wanted to get ahead of things," she said. "You know how I am." I did know how she was. My son cleared his throat. "The thing is, Dad, the house is probably more than you need on your own. And the upkeep, property taxes alone in Grey County now, it's a lot for one person." "I'm aware of property taxes," I said. "I've been paying them for 30 years, of course." His wife touched his arm briefly, a small signal I noticed. "We just mean it might make sense to consider your options." I drank my coffee. I let them talk. They had clearly talked to each other before I came downstairs, and I thought It was probably best to understand the full shape of what they were proposing before I said much of anything. My daughter had a plan for the proceeds. My son had thoughts about a condominium in Barrie, something more manageable. His wife mentioned a retirement community near Hamilton that was apparently incredibly nice. My daughter mentioned that she had spoken to someone, a financial planner, not to be presumptuous, just to understand what the options looked like. She had spoken to a financial planner before the funeral flowers had wilted. I said I was tired and went back upstairs. I read the folder that afternoon. Catherine had been thorough. She was always thorough. There were 4 documents inside. The first was a letter to me, handwritten on the pale green stationery she had always used, 12 pages. I won't say everything she wrote. Some of it is mine. But she had seen this coming, not the precise conversation about the legal pad and the columns, but the general shape of it, and she had prepared accordingly. The second document was a deed. 3 years before she passed, without telling me, Catherine had purchased a small property using money she had saved from her own income over 15 years, a very deliberate, very quiet setting aside. She had grown up watching her own mother lose everything when her grandfather died because the assets were all in his name, and the family didn't understand what they had until lawyers were involved. Catherine had decided that would never happen to her, so she had built, slowly and privately, a parallel foundation. The property was a 2-bedroom cottage on Lake Huron, near Southampton, in Bruce County. She had bought it through a lawyer in Owen Sound. It was in my name. It had been in my name since the day she purchased it. She had never mentioned it because she had never wanted it to be a topic of discussion or debate. It was simply there, waiting. The third document was a letter from the lawyer in Owen Sound with contact information and a note that all I had to do was call. The fourth document was a single piece of paper on which Catherine had written in her clear, even hand, "You have always been the most patient man I know. One last time, my love, be patient." I sat with those papers for a long time. I called the lawyer on Monday. I drove to Owen Sound on Tuesday. The cottage was real. Everything was in order. Catherine had even paid the property taxes forward 2 years. The lawyer, a quiet woman named Miss Okafor, said my wife had been in a month before her condition made travel difficult, to review everything and make sure it was complete. She said Catherine had seemed very at peace about it all. I believed that. I could hear it in the arrangement of the papers. When I got back to Collingwood that Tuesday evening, my daughter and son were in the living room. They had stayed, both of them, and I had not asked them to, and had not asked them to leave. The house still had Catherine's reading glasses on the side table. Her crossword book was on the arm of the chair. I had not moved those things, and I was not going to move those things. "Dad," my daughter said, "we need to make some decisions." "We do," I said. I sat down in my chair. "I've been thinking about it." My son leaned forward. "And I'm going to stay in the house," I said. My daughter set down her tea. "Dad, we talked about this. The upkeep alone, a house this size, on your own." "I'm not on my own," I said. "I'm in my home." She looked at my son. He looked at her. His wife, to her credit, looked at the floor. "Dad," my daughter said carefully, "we're trying to help you." "I know you are," I said. I meant it to land gently. I think it did. What came next happened over weeks, not days. I want to be honest about that because memory has a way of compressing unpleasant things into a single sharp moment, and it wasn't like that. It was gradual. A comment here about the market, a forwarded listing there, a condo in Barrie, very nice, 1 level, no stairs. My daughter extended her time working remotely and stayed in the guest room through April. My son called every few days. His wife texted me links to retirement living websites with little notes that said things like, "Just in case you're curious," with a smiley face. My neighbor, a retired firefighter named Ed who had known Catherine since our street party days, stopped me at the mailbox one afternoon in late April. "You all right in there?" he said, nodding at the house. "Getting by," I said. "Your daughter's been here a while." "She has." He looked at me for a moment. "Catherine was a smart woman," he said. He didn't say anything else. He went back inside. I thought about that conversation for days. The break came in early May. My daughter had arranged, without asking me, for a real estate agent to come by and do what she called an informal walkthrough. "Not a listing," she said, "just information." The agent arrived on a Wednesday afternoon when I happened to be home, which I suspected was not a coincidence. She was pleasant and professional, and walked through our house with a clipboard, pausing in rooms that Catherine had painted and Catherine had arranged and Catherine had lived in for 30 years. She paused at the kitchen and said it had good bones, but buyers today expected quartz countertops. Catherine had chosen those countertops. She had deliberated over samples for 2 weekends. I thanked the agent for her time and walked her to the door. Then I called the lawyer in Owen Sound. Then I called my sister, who lives in Guelph and who has known me since I was born and who, when I explained the situation, said exactly 3 words: "Do what Catherine said." I was patient for 3 more weeks. Then I sat my daughter and my son down at the kitchen table, that table with the scratch from the hockey bag, and I told them what I was going to do. I told them calmly. I want to be clear about that. I did not raise my voice. I am 67 years old, and I learned a long time ago that a calm voice carries farther than a loud one. I told them that the house in Collingwood was mine, had always been mine, was going to remain mine, and was not for sale. I told them that I had made arrangements, privately, for my own future, and that those arrangements were sufficient. I told them that I loved them, and that I expected them to go home. My daughter said, "Dad, you're making an emotional decision." I said, "I'm making the decision I want to make in the house I've lived in for 30 years, the week after my wife's funeral. I think I'm entitled to that." My son said, "We're just worried about you." I said, "I know, go home." My son and his wife left that Friday. I drove them to the bus terminal in Collingwood. I hugged my son at the curb. He held on for a moment longer than expected, and I felt in that moment that the boy I raised was still in there somewhere, underneath the worry and the legal pads and the conversations he'd had with his sister before I came downstairs. I loved him. I was very clear on that, even then. My daughter left 2 days later. She hugged me at the door. She said she was sorry if things had gotten tense. I told her I knew she came from love. I meant that too. Love can be wrong about what it wants. That doesn't make it less real. The house was very quiet that Sunday night. I made myself dinner. Just soup from the can. Nothing ambitious, and sat at the kitchen table and looked at the scratch from the hockey bag and thought about the kind of quiet that comes after noise versus the kind that comes after peace. The first kind is just absence. The second kind is something you've earned. I drove up to the cottage in June, the week after the school year ended. I still volunteer 2 days a week as a reading tutor at the elementary school, which Catherine encouraged me to start and which I will not stop. The drive from Collingwood to Southampton along the lakeshore takes about an hour and 40 minutes, through country that opens up beautifully once you clear Owen Sound. The cottage was everything Catherine would have known it would be. White clapboard, a front porch with 2 old wooden chairs, a path through the grass down to the beach. The water on Lake Huron in June is still cold enough that you won't swim in it for long, but the color of it, that particular steel blue going green in the shallows, is worth any drive. I sat in one of the chairs on the porch that first afternoon, and I thought about my wife. I thought about the 15 years she had quietly set money aside. I thought about the drive to Owen Sound when she was already ill. I thought about the stationery, pale green, 12 pages. I thought about the tulips. She had seen all of it, not the specific details, but the shape of it. She knew what people do when they are frightened about inheritance, and do not have the wisdom or the patience to wait. She knew what I would need. She had arranged for me to have it, quietly, before I knew I needed it. That is the kind of person she was. My daughter called in July. It was a better conversation than the ones in April. She asked about the cottage and I described it to her. The porch chairs and the lake, and the way the herons come in low at dusk. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Mom found that place?" 3 years ago, I said. Paid for it herself. Never said a word. Another silence, then. "That's so her?" "Yes," I said. "It really is." We talked for almost an hour. My son called the following week, and we talked longer. Things are not entirely mended. There are conversations still to have. Things that were said in April that deserve more than a phone call. But my son asked if he could bring the kids up to the cottage in August, and I said yes, because of course I said yes. My grandchildren ran straight into the cold water without hesitation, the way children do, shrieking and laughing. I sat on the porch with my coffee and watched them. Ed, my neighbor in Collingwood, was right. Catherine was a smart woman. She was the smartest person I have ever known, and I got to be married to her for 41 years. which is the central fact of my life and the thing I will be most grateful for until my last morning. She could not stop what was coming. She could not stop the cancer, or the Tuesday in March, or the kitchen table conversations she knew would come after. But she could build me a porch to sit on, and a lake to look at, and 2 wooden chairs, one for me, and one for whoever I choose. The herons come in around 7:30. Every evening, reliable as anything. I am not lonely. I want people to understand that. I am sometimes sad, which is different. I am sometimes very aware of the empty chair beside me. But I wake up every morning in a place my wife chose for me, looking out at water she knew I would love, and I think that is not a small thing. That is, in fact, everything.